Now, it is the July 4th weekend when Americans are celebrating the country's independence from colonial Britain. The part that Scots played in the founding and forging of America cannot be underestimated, and the connections between the two countries remain strong to this day. Well, let's now speak to Ian Houston, who's part of the GlobalScot network of Scottish business leaders, and he is in Washington. Morning, Ian.
Good morning to you, Andrew. Nice to be with you and your listeners.
Yeah, well, nice to hear you. So just tell us a bit about the sort of the July 4th weekend then. What kind of activities take place to celebrate it?
Well, Andrew, I'm glad to be talking with you on July 5th because this is the day that the Declaration of Independence was actually being printed and made public, being sent overseas and posted in taverns and businesses, being placed in newspapers around the colonies, being read in public squares. And so had radio existed, Andrew, in 1776, we would be doing this interview on July 5th because that was such an important day of public consumption. I think that's what July 4th and the weekend is about, is the public reaction, the parades, songs, baseball, pancakes and hot dogs. There's so many pancakes and hot dogs being consumed, and then the goodwill of fireworks and people coming together. But there are also gatherings that are peaceful reflection and discussion, even prayers at churches and libraries and beyond that happen over the weekend.
So tell me a bit about the origins of America. How big a part did people from Scotland play in that?
Such a good question. It's hugely influential and pivotal, these links. I think the key philosophical basis of the American movement in the early days of the revolutionary thought was social contract theory, which you will and your listeners will know the hallmark of that is found within the Scottish Enlightenment, which started in earnest in Scotland in the 1740s. So this idea of government derives its power from the consent of the governed. And that's a radical principle and radical idea. There were figures such as Benjamin Franklin, who came to Scotland as early as 1759 and was deeply influenced by Scottish philosophers like David Hume and Adam Smith and others. Andrew, the story that I love to tell relates to a professor that came from the Aberdeen area, William Small. He came to a teaching position in Virginia at the College of William and Mary in 1758. He had been schooled in the Scottish Enlightenment, knew of the Declaration of 1320. And he taught that, and one of his first students at the College of William and Mary was a teenager named Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson called Professor William Small one of his mentors. And he actually, when he was composing the Declaration in 1776, was thinking of Professor Small, the Scottish Enlightenment, and so it was a deep connection, Andrew. That's just a quick summary of how remarkable the Scottish Enlightenment was in prompting the thinking of these revolutionary thinkers in America.
So does Scottish heritage still get celebrated in America today when it comes to Independence Day celebrations?
Yes, indeed. I'm glad you're using that term, celebration, because that's truly what it is. I think subsequently, celebration fosters goodwill and motivation to maintain these linkages. But where I'd like it to go, and others as well, is beyond the past as well, to use that heritage, that past, to bridge it into the present and to the future. The heritage should not pull us back, but motivate individuals to find the opportunities that exist of forging new partnerships and collaboration. So that's, yes, it is a celebration, but we need to use the spark of celebration to forge these new connections.
Yeah, because next year, America's actually celebrating 250 years of its founding. How do you think Scotland could play a role going forward in terms of Scots-US relations?
Isn't it extraordinary? 250 years. That is quite extraordinary. And yes, I think that Scotland can and should play a direct part from universities and businesses and branding and creating linkages to Parliament itself, reaching out to individuals such as mayors in Philadelphia and other cities and local entities. These are rich connections, and I feel it's a huge opportunity for Scotland to help America see, yes, that past that we're talking about, but more importantly, to understand the modern and contemporary Scotland that you and I and your listeners know. Its economic fabric, the innovation that exists, the modern culture, the progressive universities and colleges, ethnic diversity, and just social enterprises and charities. There's just a modern Scotland needs to be better understood and appreciated by America, and there's a real anxiousness to do that. The 250th allows that opportunity and that opening.
Yeah. So do you think Americans are do want to reach out and embrace Scottish heritage, or do you think it's more a case of Scotland has to kind of impose itself a bit more and say, look, here we are?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. I think what you have are people who celebrate that heritage, who come to the table, go into the room, and are there and of goodwill and a good spirit. And then Scotland certainly needs to embrace that and embrace them, even literally, but then to bridge that into a discussion about what's happening now, about the opportunities that exist now. And so we're doing a good job with that, but we increasingly need to do that. I think what I would say, Andrew, it's important for listeners, as we talk about celebrating the Declaration and the 250 years and celebrate that, it's important to remember that the principles and values that were at the core of the Declaration were aspirational. And it took time for America to realize and resolve issues, the Bill of Rights, Civil War and slavery, women's suffrage, additional civil voting and working rights. All of that had to be resolved. It's a great speech that your listeners can look up by the African-American social reformer Frederick Douglass. He delivered a powerful speech in 1852. It was titled, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" And Douglass famously declared, "This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn." And so the narrative that we develop as we talk about Scotland is the ethnic diversity that exists. Connect with different groups in the United States and ensure that the voices of all people, both in America and in Scotland, are being heard. That is a real innovation, and there's a lot of territory for us to build that dialogue between the diversity of Scotland and the diversity of America, and that's something I'm really committed to doing.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Ian Houston speaking to us from Washington.